Join us at the free ABMP CE Summit on Monday, March 21st. This one-day online conference focuses on fascia and takes learners on a journey from understanding fascia, what it looks like, its role in the body in different types, to working with it using multiple modalities and techniques. Instructors include keynote presenter Dr. Robert Schleip and CE course instructors Rochelle Clausen, Allison Denny, Joy Edwards, Gil Headley, David Lazondak, Whitney Lowe, Till Luca, and Kathy Ryan. This event and 4 hours of CE is free for everyone in the profession. Visit abmp.com/summit to learn more and register today. ABMP members get 20% off the list price on all Handspring Publishing titles, including Dynamic Embodiment of the Sun Salutation, Pathways to Balancing the Chakras. Visit handspringpublishing.com to learn about these and other books. ABMP members visit abmp.com/discounts to access your discount code to save 20% on all list prices with free shipping to US and UK addresses. Find your next favorite book at handspringpublishing.com.
I'm Darren Buford.
And I'm Kristin Coverley.
And welcome to the ABMP Podcast, a podcast where we speak with the massage and bodywork profession. Our guest today is Katy Bowman. Katy is a best-selling author, speaker, and leader in the movement. She is a biomechanist who is changing the way we move and think about our need for movement. Katy teaches movement globally and speaks about sedentarism and movement ecology to academic and scientific audiences. Her work has been featured on The Today Show, CBC Radio One, The Seattle Times, and Good Housekeeping. Her best-selling book, Move Your DNA, highlighted the importance of distinguishing between movement and exercise and has revolutionized the way movement is now being discussed. This book, along with her others, has been critically acclaimed and translated worldwide. Her movement education company, Nutritious Movement, is based in Washington State, where she lives with her family. For more information about Katy, visit nutritiousmovement.com. Hello, Katy, and hello, Kristin.
Good morning.
Katy, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm so excited for this conversation because I was so drawn by the top of your blog post page on your website. It says, change the way you think about movement. And I'm so excited to have that conversation with you so that our listeners, I can learn more actually, and our listeners can learn more about that, not only about how that might impact our personal lives, but also how that might impact the way that we move and align in our massage practices. So really excited for this conversation. Let's start by learning a little bit more about your company, Nutritious Movement. How did that come to be? And what does that phrase or term, nutritious movement, mean to you?
Well, Nutritious Movement grew out of a company that I had before. It started in the early 2000s, and I'm a biomechanist, which is someone who studies the impact of physical forces and loads on physical outcomes, living systems. So I focused on what's the role of movement in the body? What's the role of movement in physiology and eventual health or disease or injury? And so I really loved studying and creating corrective exercise programs. So the company that I created, when I was in graduate school was called Restorative Exercise. It was this idea that it wasn't exercise for physical fitness per se, although it's certainly related, but it was about getting your body back to where it could even move so that you could pursue physical fitness if you wanted to, or just, physical activity for general well-being. But after doing that for about 15 years, restorative exercise is a common term. It's not really a brand name. It's just this idea of a type of exercise. And after explaining exactly what it was that I was doing enough time, as I was growing and writing more books and doing more interviews, the analogy that I use for why we need to think about movement in a more nuanced way leaned heavily into the understanding that we have around nutrition. It's this idea that it's not only make sure you eat every day, right? That you get enough calories, which is one type of nutrient, but it was like, you have to mind these categories of macronutrients, right? They have to have some fat and some protein and some carbohydrates, but even that isn't sufficient. You also have to have all these micronutrients represented, right? There needs to be different vitamins in your diet that even if you had a good total calorie, you could still not be meeting your nutritional needs. And even if you had macronutrients met, well, you still could be suffering some malnutrition. And the same goes for movement. It's not only make sure you move every day. Movement, there are ways we can think about movement in terms of macronutrient categories, and physical fitness has done this a little bit, where you've got to make sure you've got some cardio and some strength and some stretching. These are macronutrient categories of sorts. But then the micronutrients would, I think, be better understood by physiotherapists and body workers for sure. The idea of, and every part needs to be moving well. So micronutrients would be more on even getting down to the nitty gritty. I like to think about movement and teach movement on the cellular level, because that's actually where it's occurring. So it seems philosophical, but when your whole body is moving, that whole body, that whole person, ambulation or locomotion or even picking something up is only made possible because of all the smaller parts doing all the movement too. So there's a simultaneous phenomenon going on of a whole person and parts, and then the parts that make up those parts, which are the cells. And you could even think about it in terms of tissues. But that's where I landed. It's like, oh, we're talking about movement nutrition here. And that's how the company came to be.
Katy, this is a good time to talk about distinguishing the difference between movement and exercise. Can you tell us more about that?
Right. So they're often used interchangeably. And I think it comes from, and as I explain ad nauseum, probably in a few of my books, is we are a sedentary culture. Movement is, even the folks listening are going to probably be in the more movement aware group, and hopefully even the moving more group. But relatively speaking, to humans around the globe and humans throughout a human timeline, we're a sedentary group. I mean, no groups of humans have ever moved as little as we do and spent so much time inside not moving. And it affects the way we think about movement. You know, we can't even really perceive the concept of movement yet. We're perceiving more the concept of exercise. So when we think about movement, it is, in its broadest terms, simply the change of state of a tissue, state of position of a tissue, even if it's on the cellular level, that cell being squished or under a tensile load or under a torsional or twisting load, right? All of those are movements. You're changing the position of your body or a part or the tissue that makes up those parts. That's what movement is. But when we're talking about needing to move more, or the fact that movement needs to be distributed well throughout the body, we're going to default in our minds to a concept of exercise, which is a subcategory of movement. So imagine if you drew this giant circle, and I have a giant circle and labeled that movement. There's a subcategory of movement called physical activity. And that's simply those movements that use the musculoskeletal system and utilize calories. That's the definition of physical activity. It's a much smaller group, because obviously you pushing on your body or having your body pushed on is also a movement of sorts, but it does not meet the definition of physical activity. Because even though things are changing shape, movement is happening, it's not using your own musculoskeletal system when you have what I call pressure deforming movements. And it is not really affecting your caloric expenditure, which is, for researchers who have started to look into movement in the last 40 or 50 years, it's always been associated with energy systems, calories, obesity, right? That's the point of view at which movement researchers have compartmentalized movement already as movement is something that offsets calories. And to a certain extent, that is true, but not all movements are doing that, because movements are much more than the ones that take extreme metabolic expenditure. Within the physical activity category, right? So we got a big circle movement, smaller circle physical activity. The smaller circle still within physical activity is a circle called exercise. And exercise is a type of physical activity. So it still has to meet those conditions, using your musculoskeletal system, usually in a repeated fashion, and expending calories in some way. But exercise is different than physical activity because exercise is done with the sole purpose of improving one's physical fitness. So the example that I think makes it easier to comprehend the difference is if you ride your bike 3 miles to work, that's physical activity because the intention of that motion is getting to work. It's active transportation. It's serving another purpose in your life. If you were to wake up and go like, I need to exercise, I'm going to ride 3 miles today for the movement's sake, I'm going to go walk for 3 miles. That's what makes it exercise. It's when the thing that you're doing is solely for the purpose of improving your physical well-being. And it doesn't really meet any of your other needs besides those movement ones. And it seems sort of nitpicky, the difference between the two. But when you work in public health and you're working on a much larger problem of entire societies becoming sedentary, it matters because what we have is a better understanding of why people aren't moving more. Because right now we've made moving more something you do exclusively during a period of time. And as we are moving also into a society that sees reduction in free time as people are busier. And so where is movement supposed to go if we keep pursuing this phenomenon of exercise? And so that the movement doesn't have to be any different to be classified as exercise or physical activity. It's all about the driving force of it. Is it an extrinsic motivation of someone told you needed to do it, or is it serving some other purpose in your life? And of course, if we can make the things that we do more dynamic in a daily way, then we can move more simply by living our daily lives. We don't need this isolated, parsed out time for exercise.
Let's take a short break to hear a word from our sponsors.
Anatomy Trains is thrilled to announce our first ever Women's Health Symposium. This live online event takes place February 26 and 27, 2022, AWST, that's Australian Western Standard Time. Register by January 21st to receive a significant early bird discount and over $400 worth of bonuses. We have invited a powerful lineup of all female authors, physicians, therapists, and clinicians to share their passion and life's work. Visit anatomytrains.com for details. Universal Companies is the massage practitioner's best friend. Our pro-tested products include lotions, linens, and tools, plus education and marketing resources. Voted best distributor for the past 17 years by spa professionals, you can count on us. ABMP Podcast listeners save 10% on select brands of products when you place a minimum $99 order at universalcompanies.com/ABMP.
Now let's get back to the podcast. Okay, Katy, I think a lot of people think that if they're exercising regularly, that they've got their bases covered. But you encourage people to look at the types of movement that each activity is creating. Can you tell us more about the different kinds of movements our bodies should be doing each day?
Well, you can think about it in terms of mode. So mode is that way that we tend to think about a type of exercise, but I think it's more helpful if people thought about the areas of their body. So, if you were to assess your movement diet, you're going to write down, what do you do? Okay, exercising every day is great, fantastic. There's no reason to disrupt that. But you would want to look at what are you doing for exercise? Are you on a bike every day? Are you walking every day? I have this activity tracker that you can find on my website, and it really shows you how to assess really not just your exercise, but your entire day. So the thing to realize is we're physically adapting to what we do physically 100% of the time. We're not only physically adapting when we go out to exercise. So if you look at how many minutes a day you spend sitting, you could think of that as your sitting exercise program. So you could say, I walk for 30 minutes every day, but then next to that, you would also have to say, and I sit for 10 hours. So we're chair athletes in that way. And that's what makes moving more out of the chair difficult, is because you're literally taking that chair baggage with you. Those adaptations to what you do most often are why the hips don't want to extend when you do go for a walk and why that compresses your lower back. or your arms are so adapted to being on a keyboard or out in front of you, just like on a steering wheel, that when you go do play tennis 3 times a week, when you raise your arm over to serve, that lift of the arm brings the rib cage with it because the shoulder doesn't articulate any longer, and that compresses your spine. So your shoulder, which should be able to completely lift up and hit that ball, is now become a lumbar spine movement. And we don't need lumbar spine serves. We need shoulder serves. And we don't need 10,000 lumbar extensions. We need 10,000 hip extensions with every walk. So there's these sticky things. So if you could just look at what your total movement diet is a day, and you have to go outside of your exercise program, you're going to get a sense of, oh, right, when I am exercising, I do these 3 activities. My chair puts me in a hip flexion position, and I'm curved to the upper spine. You've got a little bit of hyperkyphosis, curled for the spine. How much do your physical fitness activities look like that same position? So if you get out of your chair to sit on a bike, it's sort of like eating a lot of the same food. Yes, you're moving your heart and lungs a little bit more. Things are moving a little bit more, but you might need more hip extension in your life. You might need more weight bearing in your life. Maybe you sit and swim a lot. It's like, well, those bones still aren't going to be loaded because you're still in a low weight bearing situation. Same goes for cycling. Cycling is fairly low weight bearing compared to walking or upright. So you have to think of what every tissue needs, what every part needs. And that even goes for your eyes. Like how much of all of the things that you do in a day are inside. Because now the ciliary muscles, which also need a full rotation of movement, just like your elbow needs to go through its full range of motion, are often locked into an all up close position because we're never looking beyond 20 feet in every single day. So it'd be like picking something up by flexing your elbow and then only letting it down 3 inches every day for your entire life, right? We're losing that full range of motion. So when you start thinking about it in that way, you can just pick different activities full stop, not only for exercise, but also, hey, maybe instead of sitting in your chair tonight to watch, Netflix, after you've been sitting in your desk all day, why don't you get down on the floor and sit in a straddle position or a cross-legged position? Do something to change the position of your body outside of how you're positioning it most of the time.
I love that. I love, again, just thinking about what we're doing on a daily basis and making shifts, some small, some big, but that have a really big impact on our overall well-being and quality of life. Let's shift gears a little bit. Another one of the books you wrote is called Alignment Matters. So let's talk about alignment a little bit, particularly because our listeners are massage therapists and body workers. We're working around a table for most of the day. So what are some alignment concepts that you think are really important for us to keep in mind while we're listening and while we're working?
One of the recommendations I actually make is to vary your table height. And maybe it can't be throughout the day because it could be sort of a pain, but throughout the week or throughout the month. It's like the concept of ergonomics has a lot to do with like, what's the optimal way for me to stay in the same position and still be well? So the constraint around that is like, one, there's not really a way to be well in a single position. So if you can think about maybe bending over one height of a desk or one height of a table every single day throughout your same career, there's a non-advantageous position. Similarly, it's not really advantageous to be at that one preferred height throughout your entire career as a body worker. So thinking of cross training, like this is your office. So how could you set up your office in a way where it would use your body differently? And to understand that a lot of that discomfort comes from like you are simply moving parts that you don't usually move. So it's challenging to dissect discomfort, but discomfort comes with moving more. If anyone's ever gone from being a non-runner to a runner, you'll be familiar with this concept of like, oh, I have to sort of push, I have to adapt my physiology. I have to lose and gain parts to do this. And the body's, it's interesting paradox where the body has a tremendous need for movement in total and also in diversity or distribution throughout the body. but also simultaneously, your body is looking for all opportunities to not move. Those conditions worked really well in an environment where there was not comfort or convenience or abundance that was coming to you already made, right? Like, so the environmental pressure kept you moving. And then, but also the fact that the environment was such a great pressure, you would just not move if you didn't have to. But that doesn't serve us very well in this modern environment. What's in our DNA doesn't match up as well as the environment that we're in. So that's a great shift. And then learning how to use your body better, keeping your own mobility well. Think about if you're a body worker on your list of exercise programs, number of massages, hours spent massaging, that's your current exercise program. So if you're a coach and I'm going to be like, okay, how many chest flies did you do today? You can think about how many hours you were pressing vigorously with your arms along someone's spine. And you're like, wow, I didn't do anything for shoulder extension today. I didn't do any strengthening in the opposite direction. So you would want to have a daily cross-training routine. I wrote an article that I have never published, but it's called the Body Worker Athlete. And it's just a framework of going, you are a professional athlete in the fact that you are getting paid to use your body in a particular way. But most people don't train their bodies when they don't perceive themselves as being in a physical discipline like a sport. They're not thinking like, man, I need a coach. Like, I need someone to show me what that training program is. So there's a set of motions that you could do in general. It would just be, shoulder extensions and really being able to increase the strength of your posterior deltoids, not just mobility, but strength, hip extension, because you're spending so much time in flexion, and to also put time in your day to do some of those motions throughout the day. So it's not just like a whole slew of motion in one, and then like 15 minutes at the end of the day. Keep your exercise list on your table and schedule 5 minutes in between each client. So you're changing your sheet, you're doing anything else. You're running 2 or 3 minutes through your stretches. You do our thoracic stretch on your chair. You can do it right there. You can set up your office to also be your corporate wellness program. Like, your office is also your gym, and it doesn't need to be a lot, but it needs to be distributed well to it's not, you're never going to offset. We don't offset what we do to the body, but you are making sure that these other body parts are going to be heard, and so that would be my greatest recommendation.
Okay, Katy, I know that there's not one universal answer for what should we start incorporating into our movement diet, because each individual is unique and their needs are unique. But I feel like I'd be breaking some universal podcasting rule if I didn't ask you, as our movement specialist, to talk to us about what's something that all of our listeners can start doing right away today to improve their movement quality. Is there anything you can talk us through right now as they're listening?
Pay attention to your arms and look at all that they can do. Our arms are almost never overhead, ever. So put your arms overhead right now. This motion of reaching up, and in Move Your DNA, which is a book I wrote, I have a paint the globe exercise where you imagine that your upper body is inside of a globe and you're going to paint the inside of it with the palms of your hands. And you are trying to coat as much surface area as possible. That's pretty close to what your shoulder can do, right? A tremendous amount of movement. The anatomy indicates a tremendous amount of movement. And yet, culturally, we do almost nothing with our arms. And, like typing on the keyboard. So take your arms daily through that paint the globe exercise. Every time you walk through a door, reach up and touch the top of the door frame. Or if you're too petite, use the sides and put your arm up to the side, just walk up and touch. Because we need to be getting our arms overhead more often. So I have a little post-it actually in a lot of my doorways. It just says doorway reach, because we do need environmental cues. And it's sort of like that movie Memento, where you're leaving little notes from your past self about, you remember you wanted to do this. And I know the current you has completely blocked that out of your mind. So environmental cues are really are really key. And once you see them and you do that, then you cultivate that physical habit, just like any other animal, and your shoulders and spine as a whole will feel a lot better for it.
I love that. It made me think of Ted Lasso. He has that sign, believe, above their door frame. So put something up there that you would want to touch every day, every time you walk through that doorway, something that means something to you. I love that tip.
Put one in your office too, like everywhere, and then encourage everyone else coming in, get your clients used to doing it. And then now you've got a community around it, and it's just more awareness and people doing it.
The first thing that came to mind too, where many of us wear fitness watches or whatever now at this point. And I just watch so many people look angrily at the watch every single time it tells them to stand or to move or to breathe, right? Yeah. They've already moved past this thing that's positively suggesting, hey, you should probably do this. And people are like, right. And they just reset the watch as fast as they can.
Now it's a jerk. You're like this jerk watch that I got.
Rather than saying, thank you, watch, for looking out for my wellness.
Yeah. It's like, how dare you? Who do you think you are?
I want to thank our guest today, Katy Bowman. For more information about Katy and her work, visit nutritiousmovement.com. Thanks, Katy, and thanks, Kristin.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for all that great information, Katy. Members are loving ABMP 5-Minute Muscles and ABMP Pocket Pathology, 2 quick reference web apps included with ABMP membership. ABMP 5-Minute Muscles delivers muscle-specific palpation and technique videos, plus origins, insertions, and actions for the 83 muscles most commonly addressed by bodyworkers. ABMP Pocket Pathology, created in conjunction with Ruth Werner, puts key information for nearly 200 common pathologies at your fingertips and provides the knowledge you need to help you make informed treatment decisions. Start learning today. ABMP members log in at abmp.com and look for the links in the featured benefits section of your member homepage. Not a member? Learn about these exciting member benefits at abmp.com/more.